Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Today, you're joining us for a deep dive into a really fascinating time, the world of the Japanese aristocracy, when the Fujiwara clan was at its peak,
That's right. We're going to unpack how they managed to wield so much power.
and what daily life was actually like for these nobles. Think of this as your personal tour through this really significant era.
We'll hit the key aspects you'll want to grasp as you start exploring Japanese history.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The Fujiwara dominance, it seems, centered around these titles, Sesshu and Kanpaku.
Exactly. So after Emperor Daiyo, we see Fujiwara no Tadahira become Grand Minister. And significantly, he held both of these posts, Sesshu, which is regent, and Kanpaku, the chief advisor.
Both at the same time.
Yes. And these weren't just, fancy titles. They represented the absolute height of political control at the time.
So Sesshu and Kanpaku, more than just advisors then, what kind of power did they actually have?
Well, funny enough, after Tadahira died, Emperor Murakami actually tried ruling without them for a bit.
Oh, really? How did that go?
It didn't last. It turned out to be an exception. Because after the Anwa incident in 969, appointing a Sesshu and Kanpaku became standard practice again.
The norm, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And what's really striking is that these positions then became almost exclusively held by descendants of Fujiwara no Tadahira.
Ah, so it became a family affair.
You could say that. It was like the family inherited the keys to the government, basically.
Inherited power.
Hmm.
That must have led to some intense family politics, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. The historical records definitely show intense competition among Tadahira's descendants for these roles. And this environment, it really paved the way for someone like Fujiwara no Mikinaga to gain extraordinary influence.
Ikanaga, his name comes up a lot. What made him so powerful? How did he consolidate that much influence?
Mikinaga was incredibly strategic, especially with marriage politics. He managed to have four of his daughters marry emperors and crown princes.
4. Wow, okay. That's direct lines to the throne then.
Precisely. Think about what that means. It wasn't just about family ties. It fundamentally shifted the power dynamic. The emperor became heavily reliant on his mother's side of the family, the Gaiseki, for political backing.
So he was essentially setting up his own grandchildren to rule.
Exactly right. Emperors Go-Ichiju, Go-Suzaku, and Go-Ritsei, they were all Mikinaga's grandsons. This concentration of power through family ties is just, it defines this whole period.
And this didn't just end with Mikinaga, did it? His son carried it on.
That's right. Mikinaga's son, Fujiwara no Yorimichi, served as either Sessho or Kanpaku for about 50 years.
50 years? That's an incredibly long time.
It really is, and that long tenure marks the absolute peak, the zenith of the Sekkan, the regent family's power. It brought stability, yes, but it was a stability completely dominated by the Fujiwara.
Okay, so these roles, Sessho and Kanpaku, where did they fit in the government structure? Did they replace older systems like the ministries?
That's a really important point. These positions basically operated above the traditional ministerial rules you find in the Ritsuri system. The minister of the left, minister of the right, the grand minister.
Love them.
Yes. The Ritsuri system, that legal and administrative code based on Chinese models, was still technically there, but Sessho and Kanpaku were like super ministers. Their authority went beyond even the highest traditional posts.
So it wasn't just about having a fancy title within the old structure.
Not at all. And crucially, these roles were exclusively held by people related to the emperor through his mother. That's the Gaiseki connection we mentioned.
Ah, the maternal relatives again.
Yes, that connection was the absolute key. You couldn't get these top jobs without it. It meant political power was deeply tied to who the emperor's mother was.
So for the Fujiwara, marrying their daughters to emperors wasn't just about prestige.
It was the direct path to power. It ensured their relatives would be appointed a Sesshu or Kanpaku. Simple as that, really.
And there was a sort of system for when each role was used, right? Like, depending on the emperor's age.
Yes, there was a convention. Typically, a Sessha served while the emperor was young, acting as regent.
Okay.
Then, once the emperor reached adulthood, the Sessha often transitioned to become Kanpaku, the chief advisor. So, kind of like a guardian stepping back slightly, but still being the main advisor.
And I remember reading that the head of the Fujiwara clan itself also played a role.
Absolutely. The head of the clan, the Uji no Chuja, usually held one of these top positions too, either Sessho or Kanpaku.
Wow. So it really locked in the clan's control.
Yeah.
Family leadership and state leadership were basically the same thing.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, so that paints a clear picture of the Fujiwara political machine. But what about the day-to-day? How did this affect noble life? their customs.
Right, nobile had its own distinct features. Marriage, for instance, was interesting. One common practice was kayoikon.
Kayokan.
Yeah, where the husband would visit his wife at her residence. Regularly visit, that is. Or sometimes a man might live with a primary wife but still have relationships and visit other wives.
So the wife's home was the main base. That sounds different.
It was. The wife's household was generally the center of married life, and importantly, where the children were raised.
Does that visiting pattern connect back to the power structure we were talking about, like the maternal relative's influence?
It absolutely does. Because the children were raised in the mother's household, her family, especially her male relatives, often had significant influence over the upbringing and later the careers of those children. It reinforced that gaiseki system.
Ah, okay, that clicks. What about growing up? How did young nobles enter adult society?
For boys, there was a specific coming-of-age ceremony called genpuku, usually around age 15.
Genpuku.
Yeah, it marked their official entry into adulthood and meant they could start serving at court, a really important social ritual.
And once they started serving, was career progression straightforward? Like, could anyone rise to the top?
Not exactly. Advancement was largely determined by your family status, or your iagra.
Family name, basically.
Pretty much. Your lineage heavily dictated how high you could climb. Merit played a role, sure, but your family background set the limits, you know?
It sounds like tradition and doing things the right way were incredibly important.
Oh, completely. Court affairs ran almost entirely on precedent. What was done before dictated what was done now.
Right.
And this led to the development of these really elaborate, ritualized annual events, the Nenjuji.
Nenjuguji.
Annual events.
Yes. And knowing these ceremonies inside and out, understanding all the protocols, that was considered a vital part of a noble's education, almost as important as being skilled in poetry or music.
So these weren't just parties or ceremonies, they were part of the job, part of showing you belong.
Exactly. Essential stuff. But life wasn't all politics and ceremony. Nobles also had their leisure time, their pastimes, yugaku.
Jugaku. Okay, so what did they do for fun? Well, there's a great example from the records. In 1024, Emperor Go-Ichiju and the crown prince paid a visit to Fujiwara no Yorimichi's place.
Yorimichi Mijinaga's-san.
The very same. And the specific reason for the visit was to enjoy Furnagaku boat music on the pond in his huge garden.
Boat music. That sounds incredibly elegant.
It really does. The descriptions mention these amazing boats decorated with dragon heads and swan necks, and all the couriers were there in their full formal outfits, the sokotai.
What?
It gives you a real glimpse into just how refined and aesthetic their lifestyle could be. Picture it, ornate boats, formal dress, music over the water.
Definitely a picture of a very cultivated, maybe almost peaceful existence.
Yeah.
But was it all serene? Were there underlying anxieties, different beliefs shaping how they saw the world?
Oh, absolutely. Beneath the surface elegance, there were definite anxieties rooted in their religious beliefs. A big one was the idea that natural disasters, epidemics, social unrest, these things were caused by Tatari.
Tatari.
Yeah, vengeful spirits. Specifically, the spirits of people who died unjustly or met unfortunate ends, often through political intrigue.
So political bad luck could literally come back to haunt you, in their view.
That was a very strong belief, and it led to this flourishing of memorial services called gorishu.
Goishi.
These were specifically designed to appease those angry spirits. Think of the Kitano Tenmangu Shrine. It was built to honor Fujiwara no Mishizen, who had been politically exiled. That's a classic example.
And were there other rituals for warding off bad luck?
Yes, lots. The Jian Festival, for instance, held at what's now Yasaka Shrine. Its origins are thought to lie in trying to stop epidemics believed to be caused by this deity, Gozu Tenno,
How do they try to stop them?
by displaying lots and lots of halberds hoko. And that's actually the origin of the famous Yamahoko parade you still see in Kyoto today.
Fascinating how these ancient beliefs still echo today.
Isn't it? And then there was the huge influence of Anrishi's The Way of Yin and Yang. This involved all sorts of divination practices.
Divination, like predicting the future.
More like determining auspicious times and, crucially, directions for doing things. Avoiding bad luck was key.
Ah, right. I think I've heard of things like that.
Probably. Customs like Monoimi basically staying home during unlucky periods, or katage, that meant deliberately changing your route if your planned travel direction was considered unlucky on a particular day. You'd go a different way first to sort of purify the direction.
Wow. So a lot of effort went into avoiding misfortune.
Definitely. It shows this pervasive desire to navigate life carefully, avoiding unseen dangers. So yes, elegant pastimes, but also a world very much aware of potentially harmful spiritual forces.
Okay, so we have this picture of internal court life, the politics, the customs, the beliefs. But what about the wider world? How did Japan fit into East Asia during this Fujiwara peak?
Right. It's important to remember the context. The 10th century, when Japan's own Ritsuri system was changing, was also a time of massive upheaval across East Asia.
How so?
Well, a really big event was Japan stopping the official missions to Tang China, the Kentushi, back in 894.
Why did they stop those?
It mainly signaled that the Tang dynasty was in serious decline, and it reflected a shift in how Japan saw its place in the region. And sure enough, not long after, in the early 10th century, the Tang dynasty fell.
And others fell too, right?
Yes, Silla in Korea and the Kingdom of Bohai in the north also collapsed around the same time. The whole map was changing.
A major reshuffling. What came next? Who filled the power vacuum?
Well, after some chaos, China eventually saw the rise of the Song dynasty. In Korea, the Goryeo dynasty took over. And up north, the Liao dynasty, founded by the Khitan people, became a major force.
So with all this change next door, did Japan become isolated, or did connections continue?
Connections definitely continued, but they changed form. Private trade, which had already existed with Silla and Tang, actually intensified in the 10th century.
Private trade, so not official missions, but merchants.
Exactly. Lots of active merchants sailing back and forth. The Song dynasty and Tang before it even set up trade offices in major ports to manage this, coordinating with Japan's own administrative outpost in Kyushu, the Dazaifu.
So there was some official oversight, but it was driven by private merchants.
Largely, yes. And these weren't just local traders. Their networks were extensive, reaching Arabia, India, Southeast Asia.
Really?
That far. Seems so. And within Japan, they traded with all sorts of people, nobles, powerful local families near the Dazaifu, other merchants, even the lords of private estates, the shun.
It sounds surprisingly connected, actually.
It was. We know there were communities of Song Chinese living in Hakata, that's modern Fukuoka, and Japanese monks often hitched rides on these merchant ships to study in Song China.
So plenty of exchange, even with the big political shifts.
Definitely. Goods, people, ideas were still moving.
But it wasn't all peaceful trade, was it? The outline mentioned an invasion.
Yes, that's right. In 1019, there was a sudden attack. Raiders known as the Toi, who were Jurchen people from the northeast continent, hit Tsushima, Iki, and parts of northern Kyushu.
An invasion. That must have been a shock.
A huge shock. It's called the Toi invasion. Now, the Dazaifu officials and local warriors managed to fight them off.
Okay, so they repelled them.
They did. But the event really rattled the high-end court and the aristocracy back in the capital. They were used to relative peace, focused on their internal affairs and courtly life.
So it was a harsh reminder of the outside world.
Exactly. A reminder that even amidst all the refinement and intricate politics, external threats were real.
Okay, so pulling this all together, we've looked at the Fujiwara's political maneuvering, the unique noble culture, the spiritual beliefs, and Japan's place in a changing East Asia. What are the main things to take away here?
Well, I think you see how masterfully the Fujiwara used specific tools, marriage, the Sessho and Kanpaku roles to really dominate the political scene.
Right, they shaped the whole system.
They did.
Right.
And this shaped noble life too. The elaborate rituals, the focus on precedent, even the anxieties about spirits, that's all part of the picture. It created this very distinct, elegant court culture.
But not in a vacuum.
Definitely not. Japan was still connected to the wider currents of East Asian history through trade, through cultural exchange, and sometimes, as the Toi invasion showed, through conflict.
So, thinking about all this, how might these internal court dynamics, combined with those external connections and pressures, have set the stage for what came next in Japanese history? It's something to consider, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What part of this deep dive into the Han aristocracy really grabbed your attention? Is there another area of early Japanese history you're now curious to explore further?